Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local.
All right, well, we're moving on to Mike, who did some digging into SEC documents filed by Yelp and found some interesting developments that we've talked about a little bit before in the past, but in more detail. So, Mike, why don't you sort of explain what you discovered?
So I have been tracking Yelp traffic, unique visitors for years, although I had been tracking their June numbers and they stopped publishing June numbers. And so I had to wait for the 10K to see if they republished numbers, which they did in the 10K. And I'm always struck when I listen to these presentations and look at the PowerPoint, how I know you said, Greg, that all of these type presentations, financial presentations, are sales pitches, but Yelp's particularly so. They always lead with the top level numbers. They never tell you any nuance behind the numbers. And it always just like when you you listen to Apple's presentations, it seems more factual to me than Yelp's, which seems so much more salesy. Some of it has to do with culture, but maybe they're all like this. Anyways, their presentation was totally fluff, and the 10K, brought out some interesting stuff. So one, impressive numbers from Yelp, really good recovery during COVID, given that they lost a lot of restaurant business on their ad side. They made it up with additional products and in service ads and changing out their selling model. They got rid of a lot of their yellow page-like salesmen people and sales department hammering small businesses.
I mean, it's like
over
50% smaller, isn't it? Something like that. It's pretty substantial.
Yeah, they laid off a lot, 2,000 people. I mean, it was a big number, and yet they were still able, by focusing on large multi-locations and self-serve, they were able to come in with numbers that were very good. And this is a significant change because it also removed some of the annoyances that small businesses had with their sales technique, which were very, very hard sell, really deceptive types of sales. So it was from a financial point of view, it was a good story of recovery and of structural changes to their business. But when you dig into their numbers, what you see is that their unique visitors, have basically peaked in 2017. They dropped in 2019. They recovered to roughly 2017 levels in 2019. So they've been they were flat pre-pandemic, and then just plummeted during the pandemic. And you're seeing tremendous drop in their desktop traffic. You're seeing sort of static, no growth in their app, and they have been haranguing people for years to use their app. But you are seeing growth in their mobile traffic, which I assume is coming from Google, but also likely coming from Apple and the increased use of Apple. But they still haven't demonstrated to me that they're even going to be able to get back to previous levels. And so while they have redone their business model and they've brought out new products and made it easier to sell them and provide more value, ultimately it depends on users, and it's not clear to me that they're going to be able to grow that. The other interesting number is the growth in their review volume, which has been declining pretty much straight line since 2014, dropped a huge amount in 2020, 2021. But they always talk about the top level, 244 million reviews. Literally almost 100 million of those are old. And so, one of their key values is current long form reviews. And it's not clear to me that they're going to be able to replace
that. That was the thing to me that was the most striking about your article, which is in the analysis section of our site, Yelp's Hidden Headwinds, is the idea that almost half of their reviews are stale, older than 2015. I mean, that's kind of amazing to me. It's tied undoubtedly to the decline in usage, in user growth.
Yes.
But just real quickly, to throw this in there, I think in the most recent Bright Local Consumer Reviews survey, they said that a substantial majority of people won't look at a review that's older than a year, but most people want reviews that are as recent as 3 months or even more recent than that. So the focus is on really recent reviews, and this is a big problem, I think.
Yeah.
Right. So without reviews, there's no way to recharge their
and
growth.
and the fact
Go
that
ahead,
Yelp
Tim.
makes it so difficult to leave a review, or for a first-time review anyway, to show up, and the fact that they expect these War and Peace length reviews, and those are the reviews that they sort of stake their business reputation on. I think it's going to be much harder for them to increase their review growth. Absent a radical shift in their stance on businesses soliciting reviews from their customers. I think, we're finally in an era where businesses do understand the importance of reviews. They probably understand the importance of Yelp reviews in particular, maybe not to the same extent that, Mike demonstrated with his case study of Yelp reviews a few years ago. But I think we're finally at the point where it's like, now is the time to make this shift, to sustain the value of their business on the consumer side, and potentially finally start to bring SMBs back into the fold who had largely abandoned Yelp due to the aggressive sales tactics of the past.
Well, go ahead, Mike.
To their credit, their user interface coming from search has dramatically improved. And the other day when I did it, I think I searched for a specific business and then went to the Yelp listing. They actually asked me in a short form way whether I'd done business with them and wanted to recommend them in an up-down fashion prior to the asking me to leave a review. So they are moving towards a simpler review model, but Yelp is pretty intransigent.
Well, I mean, it's interesting that you describe that sort of updated user experience, because I've talked about this before. Years ago, I had a conversation with Luther Lowe, who's now their policy guy in DC, but before that was in a more operational job. And I suggested to him that, that Yelp solicit reviews on behalf of its customers, especially with these booking and request for quote kinds of scenarios where they know that there's an engagement. And I think this sort of forces them to do more of that kind of thing. If they don't explicitly embrace that, they have to do more review solicitation on behalf of their businesses. I think they're compelled to do it. You also pointed out, Mike, that one of the things that stands in their way, one of the friction points, is that new reviewers don't see their reviews published on Yelp because Yelp doesn't have enough trust in these people that don't have a history. So you write a single review and Yelp filters it out, and then it creates a disincentive to participate in the future.
Very true.
So, I mean, another final sort of point was that the Yelp earlier whenever they did that deal with Uber, I guess it was last week, it might have been Monday, where the Uber Explorer tab is powered by Yelp. That's a bid for more user engagement. And then Chad Richard, who's one of their SVPs, in the blog post that was announcing that, talked about how they're distributing through their API. They're distributing Yelp to InDash Infotainment systems. Usage is another question, but they're going to continue.
Not to me. I don't think anybody in their right mind uses an InDash Infotainment system because they're always so crappy.
Well, some are less crappy than others,
I suppose, but I've yet to see one that works. And I've tried a number of them in rental cars and my own cars, and I consistently, in fact, in the last car, I insisted that we bought a used car and it didn't have CarPlay. I went out and bought a new head so that I could get CarPlay, because the interface was so bad, so frustrating, that I replaced it. And I can't imagine, I don't know, Toyota's terrible, Honda's terrible. Maybe there are some good ones out there. I don't know who. So that distribution channel,
it's not very promising, let's just say.
Bottom line, not very promising, right? At least from my experience.
All right. So I think we've come to quickly, we've come to the end of another episode. That kind of flew by for me. And as always, we appreciate your attention, and thank you for joining. Tell your friends about it. Subscribe to Near Media, our newsletter, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.